What's up, everyone? Welcome back to Ancient Wisdom, your weekly Pokemon TCG podcast. My name is Corey Roush. With me, as always, is DJ Keener. DJ, how are you tonight?
Living the dream. We're doing this a little different time than normal for second week in a row, I guess, really. But
Yeah,
happy to be here, even though I like getting my lunch break out this way better.
I could see that for sure, but like this actually worked out better for us specifically like this week and last week because now we have some
Yeah,
of the
yeah.
bigger online
We
events to
actually
work
got
with.
more things to talk about. Though I think with EUIC, we were going to have plenty to talk about either way this time.
This is true. This is true. But before we get into that, I didn't go to locals this week. What have you been playing, whether it be online or at locals? I think everyone who listens know that you're still just a Lugia boy, but
Yeah, I'm a
what's going
Lugia
on?
one trick now, mostly because Zach has borrowed my Mew deck for the last month, which means I don't have Forest Seal Stones to build the other decks that I want to play. Um, So my options were Lugia, Sablezard, or Guardy, and I didn't feel like hunting down a Mawile to build Sablezard. Also, the list that I like play Pidgeot and Forest Sealstone. So again, whoops. So that kind of sucked. So I was down to Guardy or Lugia, and every time I try to play Guardy, I'm just not thrilled with it. So yep, played Lugia again. Um, I got second place in the tournament. Lost to Miraidon again, which is not a bad matchup, but it certainly is not working out for me. I either don't find an out to path, I don't find a Lugia, I don't find a V Star. It's whichever one it is. Like I've basically bricked every time I've played against it, and man, does that make you wish you had best of threes.
When your
Um,
plate gets licked, your plate gets licked.
yeah, I truly am getting my plate licked. It's unfortunate. Online, I texted our group chat with a Mewtwo V Union Gardevoir Luxray deck a day ago. I have played more games of TCG Live than like literally any other stretch of that amount of time with because of this deck. It is not because it's good. It's not even because it's cool. It's because I'm stubborn and wouldn't stop playing until I opened Luxray, which took 12 games. I
Yeah, that's
lost the first 11 very badly. And I don't
wait,
even
that's weird.
I don't even actually think it was specifically like the not seeing like it was just things were always awkward. Like I was just constantly getting paired against Lost Box. They were just turn two. It's like, oh, you didn't open Luxray. Oh, okay. Also, we hit turn one Greninja attack or turn two Greninja attack. It's like especially when you're like not playing VIP paths. Those are so costly on your Ralts, and it was just all bad, man. Things were not lining up well for me. I think that deck is really sweet, and I will mess with it more because it is sweet. But that's been a painful experience. What have you been playing online? How about you?
Well, it's interesting because that's how I like. So before EUIC, but since the last recording, it was a lot of Mewtwo V Union Guardy because while it's not the full-on Luxray thing, like every time you put someone posts a V Union list, I'm like, well,
Yeah,
I'm gonna sink far too much time into this. And then after we were talking about it, like building into EUIC, I was testing a lot of Gudra, which I really like still. And I mean, if you've listened to this podcast or known me for any amount of time, you know as soon as Sander posted his list on Twitter, I was going to play that deck for a while. And I've been playing a bunch of the Sander control list, which is it's a rewarding experience because even though I've played control on and off for the last like 5 years, this plays very differently in the sense that like a lot of times with control, you're like, I don't really care what my opponent's doing. I'm just gonna let them exist. Whereas with this one, your game plan is very different into each deck, and that's kind of rewarding to try to figure it out on the go.
yeah, I agree completely with that. I think it's obviously the kind of deck that you get a lot of value from, like practicing a lot with the deck. So, being Sander, who got to grind exclusive with that deck leading up to the event and tuning it, obviously gives you a really big advantage compared to somebody else just kind of picking the deck up. I'm sure this is the best placement that Ursaluna has had or will ever have. So, or sorry, Ursaluna V. Ursaluna itself might have a better placement than this. Um,
That's true. Remember, if anyone remembers going into, I think like right after we went to Toronto, there was an Ursaluna that got some hype in the Lugia deck. So
yep, it's
keep your
it's an out to
keep your
some of
eyes
the
peeled.
nonsense in there. It is possible. That's all I'm saying. I think that's rotated, so I don't know if it's
No,
possible anymore.
it certainly did not rotate because I mean,
I thought it was from like a really weird set, but you're probably right.
well, the only reason why I'm guessing, I'm looking it up now because it wouldn't make sense to me. That came out in Legends of
Oh,
Arceus,
then
the
there's
video
no way it
game.
rotated. Yeah,
That's
yeah,
what I
yeah, yeah.
mean. Yeah, it's
I
Astral Radiance.
okay. For some reason, I thought it was in a weird set. Maybe that's just like the Teddiurse or whatever that's in the GLC deck.
That's very
That's probably
possible.
what it is. So, but still, I'm gonna guess that's the highest placing for any card with Ursaluna in its name currently, and certainly will be for Ursaluna V probably ever.
That's fair. And until Sander brings it to NAIC and wins the event. But I appreciate what you're saying.
No chance he plays the same deck again. My man just doesn't do that.
Oh, it won't be the same deck, but I could see Ursaluna V
Is he
still
still
being his
having an
coach.
Ursaluna? Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. But let's get into the events because we did a lot of predicting last week, whether it be with us or when I had Shay and Demi on, and we weren't too far off. So before we get into the stuff that we were kind of right on, I do want to touch on the stuff that we were wrong about. And I'll frame it in this way: did Alex Szymanski make you like Stink?
No. I think Alex Szymanski very correctly identified a hole in the metagame and was willing to suck it up and not shower for a weekend in exchange for a trophy. Frankly, I'm a little bit too proud to do that, but at the end of the day, it would be worth it.
I will say that watching his deck play out, because it did not just play out like your typical Arcdura deck.
Played pretty close to it, man. Let's not give him
Close.
too much credit just because he's cool.
No. I guess my point is, and it's because the Dura is not good in every matchup, but it was nice to see like the couple of games you saw on stream where it's like, oh, it's and not that you'll like this any better, but I was like, oh, that's Arceus with 2 Drapions on the board. That's kind of neat.
I know, exactly. That's just embarrassing.
Yeah, but what it did was it made me realize that eventually it's okay to stop being so stubborn. And I don't necessarily think that's spoken for him, but it's certainly spoken for us because that was a clear hole in the metagame. And I think we actually even touched on that and just said we wouldn't do it. It's not worth it.
I was going to say, I think I don't know if we had this conversation on the podcast or separately. The exact conversation we had was, hey, I think all these decks that we like are pretty bad against Arctura. And then if we had the conversation off air, I'm sure our response to that was, yeah, but no one wants to smell that bad.
Yeah.
And if we had the conversation on here, I'm sure we said, yeah, it's worth taking that risk. Which I do think it was worth taking that risk that like you weren't going to play against Dura. Because even though it was an obvious like hole in the meta that no one was playing to beat it, its play rate was obviously going to be low enough that it was worth risking for this weekend. And for the people who brought well refined lists and tested well, the weekend went really well for them. There were 3 Arcturas, 3 Arc like counter Arc piles in top 16. One of them was actually Pikachu Vulpix and Espeon. But
there's no way you like that one better, right? Like I know you do because you're weird, but like
I like that one better out of principle because if I'm playing Duraludon, I'm playing Lugia.
Yeah, okay. I guess that's. But I mean, like if I'm playing, I guess you could also say if I'm gonna play Pikachu, I'll just play like Miraidon. Oh, I hate Miraidon too.
I'll play Pikachu.
Yeah.
I mean, genuinely, the thing here is that you think the Vulpix is actually really attacking the metagame. Also, that's the reason you play that deck because you think Vulpix is
much better
good.
Position than I thought. Yeah. I've been making fun of that Vulpix card since it was revealed.
That also the miss by us and most people is the Vulpix, honestly. Because like Arctura on its own wasn't going to be good enough. It was playing the Vulpix, it was sucking it up and playing Double Drape, which doesn't feel good when you're building your deck ever to go, oh god, I guess I have to play 2 of these. And also it's cheating, obviously, but
yeah. I would say that I think what made me underrate the Vulpix, like not that I even really consider. I played against the Vulpix some actually on ladder last week. I was like, well, that's dumb. Why is this person doing this? I kind of get it now, but I think why it never really dawned on me was because I wasn't playing Guardy, and I also would have probably underrated it if I'd even thought about it because I didn't think Guardy was going to be I didn't think it was going to be the play of choice by, I mean, least of all the Limitless team, right? Like yeah. I didn't think Tord and Robin were going to bring that to this. So.
It's funny how quickly our and this is just how metagames work, especially early on, how quickly like our process changed that like hours before we recorded last week, we were like, okay, we both have come to the same 2 of the 3 top decks, and here's number 3. Well, running from that as we were working more, it was actually like, okay, well, now if these are your top decks, I actually don't think that Lost Box, especially Mirage Gate Lost Box, is a tier 1 deck anymore. And once you push that down to a tier 2 deck, and if the play rate is kind of commensurate with that, suddenly Guardy looks a lot better. Because like
the issue is that it wasn't commensurate with that yet.
It was in day 2.
Yes, you're right. So
and that's especially so, I'll pull this up now because I found the day 2 play rates broken down by like with the Radiant separated and that sort of thing. We actually nailed the day 2 breakdown with our 3 decks that we thought were the best. Lugia, number 1 day 2. Gudra number 2, and Mew number 3. And then Greninja Lost Box was the fourth most played deck in day 2, with Sablezard a couple spots behind it. But Guardy is actually pretty good against Lugia. I think it's probably close to 50-50. I think out of the top decks, that's the only deck still that I feel like you're like good against. I don't know enough about the Goo matchup to say anything there. I haven't played either side of that matchup to comment. I could look up the stats, but I don't know. I feel like those are misleading to only use those with no games. But I mean, we crushed it on that. We missed on Arceus in general, I guess, because we thought Arctina was the best Arceus deck. But again, like we did acknowledge Dura, but kind of blew it off, and that is definitely like some pretty bad hubris on our part. Like we have to acknowledge those decks, and that's a big one for our process going forward. But we did also kind of miss on the Vulpix.
And in fairness, I actually think that this is not me giving us an out or anything, but I think it's a hole in the way that we covered it, not in the way we would have prepared for it. Because I think we've said multiple times, anytime we've been preparing for an event or anytime we see somebody else preparing for an event, I don't think we would have gone in with the hole. I think we would have probably played something to possibly answer it because, and maybe like that's.
I'd have to go back and look at what the online results looked like from those late nights again, because I think if we looked at those and there wasn't a Dura in top 64 of those events,
that's fair.
And I honestly feel like that was the case. I feel like Arctura was so off the radar that it actually was. It was correct to metagame ignoring it and just go, well, hopefully it just works itself out. And
that's fair.
People who played it, who had good enough lists that went, it's not going to work itself out, good for them. Like they figured it out and they nailed it. I think really this is a congrats to those guys for metagaming properly, more than it is to everyone else for ignoring it. And we did, in fairness to the not ignoring it, we talked for at least a couple minutes last week about maybe we should play Single Strike Urshi if we play Lugia.
Well, yeah, and I was just going back to how like all last format, whenever people were taking out the answers for it, and I think going into every event, we both said we weren't necessarily comfortable with it. Like,
yeah, we absolutely.
So that's where I'm coming from. But going on to Guardy, because you touched on that, Tord got second with Guardy, and Robin, I believe, got top 16 with the same list. It was he did well with the same list, if not top 16. But I know you're not you didn't love the list generally, but does his finish make you feel any better about Guardy's position? I know you just kind of outlined it with if it's with is it just as simple as Greninja Lost Box is going to be kind of not hated out of the format, but see itself trickle down a little bit more in play rate?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you look at just what happened this weekend, like with where Greninja Lost Box was, that's a huge buff for Guardy. If you look at what Lugia's conversion rate was, that's really good for Guardy in day 2, if we're saying that's one of its other positive matchups. And first off, like, it's Tord, right? Let's start there. It doesn't really matter. I mean, my man has won events with some real garbage, just so we're all on the same page, right? Especially first events of formats, like he's built different for him, and that's, credit to him, credit to his testing group, like that just abysmal looking Urshi deck that they crushed. Whatever was that, EUIC last year?
I don't remember.
You know what I'm talking about? The one that they were like legit, the deck looked like someone had just thrown a dartboard at random supporters and they described the deck as being a fever dream even. Like, yeah, I mean, it just, you can't use too much logic when you're assessing these situations with him. That's credit to him and a testament to, his play level and ability to work his way through weird game states.
By the way, real quick, good for you, because it was a USC last year, and he got 5th, and I believe, let's see how many people went. He's the only one on the same list that made, like, they have a registered list for. But yes, one of supporters, he had 2 Sonya, 1 Cynthia's Ambition, 1 Birdkeeper, 1 Avery, 1 Raihan, 1 Clara, 1 Boss's Orders, 1 Cheryl, and 1 Peonia.
2 Sonya, by the way. That was the important supporter to play 2 of.
Yeah, you needed to get those dark energies for Hoopa and Galarian Ultra.
Dude, that's one of the most just horrendous looking decks of all time.
Yeah, he got 5th.
Yeah, well, if it looked a little less horrendous, maybe it would have top 4'd.
Okay, so let's actually look.
It won the event, right?
Yeah, Gustavo won the event. I didn't look at his list. Yeah, let me look at. I don't know why we're. Yeah, okay. So
yes, why are we deep diving last year's EUIC Urshifu deck?
Very worth it, because so get ready for this. So he played a bunch of 1 of supporters and a 2 of, but the split here is different. It's 2 Avery, 1 Research, 1 Boss, 1 Cheryl, 1 Raihan, 1 Sonya, 1 Piers, and 1 Clara.
It's amazing.
And then Pedro got 3rd with Pedro Torres, who also
Yeah,
top
top
four
four
this
this
event.
event too.
Yeah, he was playing a Gossiflor for Call for Family. He was playing two Sonya, well, I think this might be the same. Yeah, it looks like the same
The
supporter
same
list as
supporter line
Tord.
is stored.
But then, of
Yeah,
course, he had to change up the deck list to get a Gossiflor in there.
of
So
course, obviously. Yeah, man. That so to that point, like, are you really you want to draw the parallels here? This one of supporter stack is a little more reasonable. This is kind of common for Gardevoir actually, but so I don't
it's
know.
really funny. Yeah,
I just don't put that much stock into it as a whole. I do think like Guardy is a lot better position than we thought before we recorded last week, and if we took an extra 20 minutes to like talk and think about it before we started, we probably just said actually Guardy is probably like a tier up from what we thought it was. I think part of this is also that like good players get better value out of playing decks with trade in them. That's just always going to be true, so that's going to help Tord out here. But yeah, I mean, I think I don't know. He kind of feels like he went. It kind of feels like he went like halfway on some of the stuff with the deck. It's like trying to be more consistent than other decks, but still not maxing out on cards like Fog Crystal or Ultra Ball. You're playing Luminion, but not maxing on Ultra Ball, which seems backwards to me. Going down to one non-EX Guardia, but still playing two rare candies, which does seem fine to me, but it's like a little bit awkward, especially again when you're only going to play the three Ultra Balls, so it's going to be a little harder to find those. Um, I don't know. I mean, I've messed with the list since then. Like I've played a little bit of regular Gardevoir and changed some cards as I went. Like I think Tord was definitely on the right track. I was really hesitant to play two Zacian Vs. I've gone back and forth on that, but like I think that decision's correct. Um, I'm happy with the lower Guardy count. One of the cards that he played that I'm pretty low on actually, so I wanted to get your thoughts. How do you feel about the Cresselia in here? I'm at the point where if I'm going to play the two Zacians, I just don't want to play it.
yeah. I think it's weird that he. It seems like, and I think Grant Manley pointed this out on his Twitter post after he played in the London Cup, where he didn't understand how Guardiolus took a complete L to Lost Box, and it feels like the Cress is only in there for the Lost Box matchup, and I still feel like it's just an
I
L in the
don't
match.
think the Crest does what you want it to in that matchup though. Like
I
it,
just don't think it does anything.
you have to. It does something in the sense that like if they Sableye and spread to knock two of your guys out at once, it's good. But if they don't, if they just kill a Curlia, it doesn't do anything.
Yeah, I would. That would
I
be.
don't
And
get it. So it's
I
out of
think
my list anyway. I guess to sum that up, I cut that in energy to max out the ball search from his list, and then I made some other changes to like just to some things that I liked more or less. But I think I mean the skeleton. We said this kind of before too. It's like somebody's gonna crack a Guardy, and I don't think he actually cracked it, but like the joke last week was it's gonna be 4 or 5 cards different than standard. That's what we have here.
yeah. Yeah, it's not like you said. I don't think he necessarily cracked it. I think that he did the Tor thing and just made it as consistent as he could. And I think that there's still cuts
And
to
again, I actually think
consistency.
he could have made the deck more consistent because I
Yeah,
I still find this deck infuriating to play. It's just so high variance on your first turns, and if you don't get set up enough and your opponent's playing Lost Box, you're just dead. But again,
welcome.
the play rate of Lost Box is at a spot, especially at this event, that was okay. I'll tell you that in low ranked PTCGL, it is not at a spot where that is reasonable, and Gardevoir is essentially unplayable still.
Maybe you should get your bread up.
Yeah, man, it sure would be higher if I didn't dedicate about 200 points to playing Luxray decks.
Yeah, that doesn't help at all.
But I got 20 back when I finally opened it.
On on to the next decks. I can't even address that. Um, so one of the things that I think is a common misconception, and I'm saying this specifically to one of our listeners who was dumb enough to drop it in my DMs, was to tell me about how like if one deck does well, then that kind of outlines everything that we said was wrong about a deck.
Are we going to talk
First
about Maradon
example,
now?
that's one of the two. I was told the Maridon was a good deck because it got top 8. It was also the only copy in top 64. That deck is butthole.
I just want to make this clear. Things can top 8 without being good. I got second
The
in the
other
World Championship. I'm not good at anything.
Okay, yep. I mean, the other argument was for like Tina being good because halfway through day 1 or day 2 it was in first place. I was like, well, it ended up outside of the top 16.
I'd like to make it very clear that this event, Tina getting 21st or whatever, somewhere in top 32, the highest placing copy, that did not make a case for the deck being playable. Everything that happened in this event made it very clear that Arctina is a complete, or Lost Zone Tina. Which one are we talking about? Lost Zone
Lost Zone
Tina.
Tina.
Sorry, when I hear Tina now, I think Arc Tina. That's the spot
Mhm.
that Lost Zone Tina is in. Lost Zone Tina is a stone unplayable deck. There is zero reason to play it over any other Lost Box variant, and this event made that extremely clear. Uh, don't hit me with some sort of bullshit that you're going to tell me that, ooh, but it's probably better against Dura. It's just not. Don't worry about it. Like,
I agree. Sorry, Zach, for shitting on your dreams. But you'll also get a kick out that I said your name on the pod because that's who you are. Yeah, I just between those two decks, those are two decks that we were pretty down on coming in, and I walked away feeling a little bit vindicated, and especially Maridon, because Maridon didn't have a non-zero play rate. It was featured a bunch, mostly the same player because the deck was
they're
too
the
bad
only
to
one
feature with
winning.
anybody else.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, I don't know. Did you walk away with any additional thoughts about those decks, or is it kind of exactly where you thought it was, and you're gonna have to see some sort of real change for if either one of them to creep back up?
Yeah, so I mean, I think Lost Tina is unplayable. If just to nip that one in the bud, there, just don't come at me with any interest in that deck sounding playable. It's you can literally take those cards out of your Lost Zone deck and play a better Lost Zone deck. You could probably make zero changes to your Lost Zone Tina deck other than cutting the Giratinas and replacing them with energies, and your deck would be better. So do that. Um, Miraidon is a little bit different.
Yeah.
I don't like this list. I don't think the deck is good right now still. But I mean, I've compared it favorably to a deck that I think is an all-time great Pokemon deck before. So like I think that there's definitely some positives to the engine. I mean, Tandem Unit's an insane ability still. Um, this list went a little crazy. It tells you kind of where the power level of the deck is that the person who played it, and I don't have their quote pulled up to discuss this specifically, but they said the deck was missing something and felt like it always came up short, so they decided they were just going to flip for it and jam some Cramomatics in there. That is not inspiring for the power level of your deck. You just said your deck is so bad that you need to play Cramomatic to flip to hit what you need. Like, Cram's good in Mew because it's free to lose cards out of your hand, right? You miss, you Genesect, whatever. It's not free in here, man. Your card draw is literally, for research, a Greninja and Raikou if it's active. That's not much. That's not good. I don't
Yeah. No.
understand, even for this guy, why those aren't just trekking shoes. I haven't seen a reason for that.
Well, because
um,
Trekking Shoes doesn't 50% of the time hit you a generator. It does it like less than that. Like I assume that's the math, and I just don't think that that's good enough math.
there's
I
also only
can't.
19 other items to or 19 items total in this deck to discard.
Yeah, you're always gonna.
Items.
Yeah, you're always gonna discard Cram for Cram and hit heads.
Yeah, that's why there's 3 of them. Yeah, no. I mean, I don't hate that, like, is your logic, by the way, if you're, like, playing some crap deck. We've talked about this before, where if you're playing a tier 2 or tier 3 deck or whatever, you kind of need to give yourself a high rollout, which they did, and obviously that worked out for them. And I'm not even saying, like, hitting on Cramomatics is the reason they made top cut. Like, the deck is very strong and aggressive as far as, like, your early setups. And if people stumble against you, like, you might be able to just run them over.
Well, that's what it is, right? I think that's the most important part is that, and like giving anything else to give you a chance to outrun somebody on turn one. I can at least I don't agree with it,
I
but I
actually,
get there.
I don't even know that that I hate the crams. I just think I would build my deck a little differently from this, even more so if that's the route I was going for. No judge. Like, I get where they're coming from too. They're saying, like, I don't disruption is not the way I'm winning my game. I'm winning my games by setting up, a turn one. If I go second, I'm attacking turn one with Raikou or Miraidon, taking a knockout. Turn two, I'm attacking again. Turn three, I'm attacking again. I actually feel like their boss count might be a little low if that's their game plan. Like, you might want 5 gusts, honestly, but
I think so too. Yeah.
because that's been one of my things with the deck is, like, I almost want to play like 4 bosses orders and some Serenas a lot of the time because you are just aggressively chasing knockouts. That's what you're good at. That's what the deck's built for. And I don't feel like the Flaffy versions saw any play, which I do feel like is like especially if, again, we're going to talk about Lost Box being on the decline, being good for Gardevoir. It's really good for Flaffy too, so maybe there is a version of like Flaffy Box that's a little bit better that we haven't seen yet. But I mean, like, as a whole, this is kind of what this deck should look like. It's pretty close to kind of what I would build this deck as. I wouldn't play Crams. I would certainly play Trekking Shoes. I still like Arven a lot in the deck.
I do too.
because it actually just does the thing that Cram does, except it guarantees that you get to Electric Generator. God, I could not remember the name of the most obviously named card ever. Gets you to that, and it can get you to two of them if you need to flip that with your Forest Steel. And I do think Choice Belt's actually pretty good in here because it gives you a little bit less reliance on setting up as many Reggie VMAXs. So you could even debatably cut down on that line if you were doing that. So, but yeah, I mean, it didn't change my opinion on the deck, especially Regieleki versions. But good for this guy. It's definitely like a tier 3 deck still, and top hitting doesn't change that though.
Yep, yep. Let's see. Anything else that the only other thing that I had from EUIC. Oh, sorry, two things. So, and the reason why I forgot is because we've mostly already talked about it just in passing. Do you think that Sable's Art is the best version of Lost Box, or do you think it was the best version for this weekend?
It was definitely the best version for that weekend, which was something that we had kind of also come to after we recorded, maybe sometime in the middle of day one. And we
Yeah.
were like, oh, wait, how do we beat Gudra? And it's like, oh, well, I guess with some Switch stuff, or if you play like Echoing Horn, Charizard can do that.
Yep.
So it's like, oh, this is the version that can actually beat Gudra. Oh, this is the version that's a little bit better against. It's better doing the trap thing against Guardian Lugia, so that helps. Though, I mean, you can obviously just beat Guardy very easily with Greninja Lost Box, so that's kind of a moot point. But I mean, I think it was definitely the better version for this weekend. I am kind of TBD on if it's the best version going forward. I think that'll take a little bit more playing and like addressing the metagame, but right now it looks like Gudra's not going anywhere, and if Gudra's not going anywhere, then Sable's Art stays the best version.
Yeah.
Uh,
What I would say is that I think that a lot of people who wanted to act like it was like the fourth best version really had to get their eyes open. And I don't necessarily think it was like top level players. I think it was more like
mhm,
people like just reacting. But like, I mean, obviously, whenever you see like Pedro playing this version and the Azul team playing this
mhm,
version, obviously, like the top players came to the same conclusion that this was the way to go. But I think that for a lot of like the pre-EUIC testing, it was talking about how the uh whether it be the Turbo list, which has done well online since, or the Sky Seal Stone version, were the ways to go. As long as you were playing Mirage Gate and Greninja, you were in a good place.
mhm.
As somebody who played, I mean, the first version I played was that Foxbox deck, which was with Charizard. And obviously, I don't necessarily think that list was correct, but I do think that there's just something really to be said about doing basically what you want all the time, and like you set up all the time because your deck is just so much more straightforward. You're not hoping to hit all the combo pieces all the time, and
Mhm.
eventually you get to 10, and eventually you get to pop off with Charizard, and sometimes you attack with Charizard twice, and that's broken.
That's really good.
So yeah, I don't know. I think that this deck is really good.
Yeah, it feels a lot more like laborious and clunky to play because it is like a long setup to get to 10 in this version, but you have the time because you're mono one prizers, so it's not like an issue. Your opponent might have three prizes by the time you get there, but that's kind of okay because you still have like three more turns to take your prizes. And if you've done, some sprinkling of damage in with Cramorants up to that point, you're kind of just in the clear. You'll
Yep.
be able to figure out how to take your prizes, which is great. The deck has more room for different tech stuff than the faster versions do. You're able to fit the Halucha, you're able to fit the Mawile Trap, things like that. You're able to fit a Mill Tank, which I don't believe is playable. The real devil's advocate argument here that's to say that this isn't the best version anymore is that Dragonite has historically been the card to make you good against Duraludon. So, does that bring Dragonite Lost Box back into the forefront of your Lost Box list, which then brings Greninja back in, which could really kind of flip the whole meta around if you get to that point, because now we're talking about Guardy moving back down a tier probably.
So I don't actually. I think that while that is historically true, I think that things may change with that because the reason why that was the case the last format was because you had Hyper Potion and the deck was playing like stuff like Crystal Cave and um what the Parasol. Two of those three cards don't exist anymore, and
Mm-hmm.
the third is a stadium they don't play anymore. So I don't actually know if because like yes, obviously 330 is a mountain to climb, but being able to like sprinkle onto it with Sableye is super relevant for what you're doing to set up Charizard math. I actually I would like to test it more. And I like obviously I think that a Dragonite is better than what you're doing, but I don't think it's like before like that felt like an auto loss for Sable's art, and I don't think that's the case
I'm
anymore.
just going to give the devil's advocate that by the end of last format, they were not playing any Crystal Caves and we're down to a single copy of Hyper Potion. The Parasols obviously were still there.
Well, that's fair. I
which
forgot. I didn't realize they had gone down that far.
yeah,
So
I
that's a
was
fair
I,
point.
I was thinking through. Like I think at some point they went down to 0 hyper potions, but there was one in there still.
Okay.
And some lists might have been on 0, but the list that I found is here's another one from the same event. This list was on 0, so down to 0 to
Valid.
1 hyper potion, and nobody played the cave anymore. So like that wasn't the thing, but Parasol could have been the thing swaying the matchup. So last format
Yeah.
Sables are played like a bajillion vacuums, so tough to say for sure. But I get your point there. It was obviously there were things that were making this matchup worse before than it is now. In the current decks are a little bit less like Dura focused, obviously. Like old Arc Dura
Yeah.
decks were just like 4 Arceus, some V stars, and then like a 2/2 or 2/3 Duraludon line. And these lists have other attackers. They've got Drapion. They've got other cards kind of filling out their slots. Um, but I mean, you still have gigantic guys and a lot of paths, and you have Sharon's cares for your Arceuses, right? Like,
Yeah.
I don't know. I see the matchup as still being pretty Arc Dura favored, but I think it's not as bad as I was saying, but I think it's probably worse than you're guessing still. So somewhere in the
Yeah.
middle of
That's fair.
those two ideas. So I don't know, but none of that changes how good Dragonite is against that stuff by trading efficiently. So that's kind
Yeah.
of I guess where I'll lean on that part of the argument.
Yeah.
Um, but I think that both versions are still totally reasonable. I do just kind of feel that both are tier 2 decks right now.
Yeah.
To kind of put a pin in Lost Box, do you think, because we saw Pedro play it, we saw Azul Grant, etc. play it, do you think that the Mawile trap in Pidgey is going to be necessary, or do you think now that it's a known commodity, you just got all those cards from your deck?
Um.
You know, was this addressing a hole that some people had caught on to, or some people maybe knew about but thought not enough other people would be playing it and ignored it, didn't respect it enough? Or
Yeah.
do you think that
I think that
continues, or is it just like, all right, it's out of the bag, cut them?
I think it could end up being very similar to where paralysis was last format. Not necessarily filling the exact same niche,
Mm-hmm.
but if it's not like you're kind of playing it by ear and hoping that like if you want to play it, you're hoping people think no one else is and they'll stop respecting it. If
Mm-hmm.
they are respecting it, it's brick unplayable. So I don't know. I think that that's an interesting niche to fill, and I think that it's something we talked about like I said ad nauseum last format once paralysis became a thing, and this is a similar kind of concept. So I don't know. I think that I would probably like if I was going to the next like the Portland, I think is the next American event. If I was going to that, I think I'd cut it. If I'm going beyond that, I think I'd probably try to test the waters and see how the meta develops over time, if that makes sense.
I think I would be too scared to play it going forward, just not even necessarily because I think a lot of people will be packing it, like packing the out. But my issue with this one is if people know you're doing it and like they have the out, you just lose. It's
Yeah,
not like at least against Lugia, the game is just over if they have the out. You're not allowed to like come back afterwards because you're like your only out is to deck them and they deck you first when you go through the motions there.
yeah,
So that's not like a real game plan to me. I think you can steal some wins against Guardy with it, but your Lost Box, you don't need to do that.
yeah. That's true. That's a valid point. I think and this was the last thing I was going to bring up from EUIC proper, was that I think my opinion of it is a little bit colored because I like the Sander control deck to play them all well, and I don't think that's necessarily going away. I don't think it's going to be like last format where he put together a control deck and it became almost commonplace. But I do think that it still has its merits in this format.
Mhm.
So we so we kind of glossed over things real quick with the decks that we got right and everything like that. But like yeah, Mew got a top cut and was in top 4. Gudra, I believe, was in top 8 and got was it ninth or 10th? It was right on the bubble again
Ninth,
because
yeah.
yeah, which was one of the hits of the weekend. I know that, like players like Andrew Mahone and Piper Lapine were playing it as well, made day 2. So like the deck was about as good as we thought it was going to be going in.
I also want
But
to
no,
stress that I don't have the day one play rate number in front of me right now, but the conversion rate was absolutely insane. I can actually find this real quick. But like we talked about the deck and we did acknowledge that it probably would be a little bit underplayed. I actually think that it ended up seeing more played than we thought it would have, and then converted on an extremely good rate as well.
yeah, I think it's
Um,
gonna be even. I think that's gonna be like obviously not the big winner of the weekend in terms of play rate because I think the Arc pile decks are gonna see the highest spike just because they probably saw like next to no
no
play
play.
and are going to be played now. But I think Gudra really kind of solidified itself as a part of this meta, which
Gudra
is
ended up being 7.7% of the day one field. For reference, Lost Zone Tina was 8.8% of the day one field with about 20 more decks. So less played than Tina. Still ended up being like 7.5%, 7.7%, which actually seemed high to me. and converted into day two as 15.8% of the day two decks. That is a monstrous conversion rate to double your presence from day one to
Yeah,
day two.
the deck's great. Like I'm just, and then let's get to Lugia. It's your favorite deck to play, and it was what the only you said the only deck that had two
Only
in
deck
top.
to put two copies into top cut, which was a decent bit of variance because there wasn't another copy in top 16. The next one was around 20th place.
Yeah,
In both lists that topped played some number of Duraludons. I think like once we've acknowledged already that Dura was a hole in the format, it makes a lot of sense for this weekend for you to play Dura in your Lugia deck because you're already saying like nobody else is playing an out to it. I don't think that playing like the 1/1 Dura line, which I believe Trevor did, who top cutted, I don't think that makes a lot of sense if you're like trying to acknowledge other people's Duras or Dura Mirs and Lugia. Um, because if you can't like commit it to the board first, if they boss yours and then attack with their Dura, you've lost the trade already, so you have no out anymore, and they took three prizes. So I don't think that's like viable. I think you can play the double Duraludon list that Eric played and Jose Morero also placed well with. I don't remember if it was 32 or 64, but also placed well with. I think that's more reasonable to do. But honestly, with the amount of goo and the amount of Duraludons, whether they're in mirrors or in actual Duraludon decks, I think I'm leaning towards single strike Urshi. Do you feel kind of similarly on that, or would you be like a little more likely to just play the Duraludons and accept your wins and make people have the outs to it?
that's a loaded question, Dave.
So like
Um,
just purely from like a win rate point, because I'm this isn't even me coming at this from like that I don't want to play Duraludon angle from
yeah.
the I want to take a shower. We've only described Arc Dura as a dirty person deck. You're allowed to play Lugia Dura and still shower. It's okay.
Well, if the caveat is that I'm still allowed to shower, I think I'd still probably prefer the Dura because while we're saying people should respect it, I just got so used to last format, people just deciding not to. And if they're not going to respect it,
I mean, you're
man, is
totally
that so
right.
much. Man,
Totally
that is
right.
so much better than playing a 1/1 Urshifu. I really like the
Hmm.
Urshifu, and I think that there's something to be explored with trying more single strike attackers because, like, they there's a like I mean the Yveltal saw no play, the Tyranitar saw no play. There's some weird cards in here that have some like niche uses that I could see popping up over time, and obviously Urshi's not a niche use; it is just a wall
It's one of
breaker.
the most targeted uses actually out of all of these.
Yeah,
Yeah, but I
but
get your point exactly that there's a lot of cards in here that kind of haven't seen a ton of play that there's definitely options for, and
I would say though, if you're going up against one of the ones that's the 1/1 like Duraludon line, then obviously I prefer the Urshifu. But if they're playing 2/2, I kind of want to have my own Duraludon lines to be able to combat that. And I think that the 2/2 is probably going to be the more common, like you were saying, which sways me because I don't want to have to dump all my energy just for them to promote another one and then have to hope to hit both urns at the same time to recycle
yeah,
them.
I mean, I think I've kind of been thinking about this, and I haven't made this change in my deck yet. But like, I think you probably need to play at least one, and you have to play Impact Energy to play Dura too. But I think you need to play at least one Impact Energy if you're going to play Urshi also, just so you
Then
can
that makes
like
sense.
feed both the Urshi and another attacker. You're obviously not going to get as many single strike energies on the other one since you need three for the Urshi to one shot Dura. But if you can like lead with your first T-Tar that's attacking into like a regular V with just one single strike energy and an impact energy, if you still one shot regular Vs, that's good enough, right?
Yeah. Like obviously there's a game plan there, and I think that I think what makes me like this so much as I did not play Lugia last form or like it, but like these kind of adaptations here are kind of what brings it back to what Lugia was last form was forcing weird prize mapping, and then especially in the mirror, as the mirror like people can say that the mirror kind of homogenized at some point, or like there was not. I thought there was still development in the format, and the sense that you were forcing whether it be the double fish or things like that as the format went on you force them to take prizes in different ways or try to prevent them from taking prizes in certain ways. And these kind of adaptations here feel exactly like that to me. And I like
Yeah,
that is interesting. I can't say that I have a definitive feeling on it yet because admittedly, I've played no games with either version. So because there was a control list
mm.
posted this week, is it going to play something else? But
Yeah. So I've played with kind of every version of Lugia to some amount. I've played the least of the Duraludon versions. I did play them before uh, the event, and it does feel like a lot clunkier because you have to play a bunch of impact energies and you know some of the lists are like no Messagoza, all or Tower of Darkness, not Collapse
mm,
Stadium, and that feels a lot less consistent to me. it's a lot more controlled if that's like what, don't mistake those two things. I guess draw two to try to hit the card you want is basically always less likely to hit it than flip a coin to get the card that you want. Like, I know we just kind of memed on this with the yes, Cat, the Cramomatic / trekking shoes in Miraidon, but like Messagoza is more likely to get you the card that you need in Lugia than discarding a card from your hand and drawing two is. That's not to say that discarding a card and drawing two isn't good sometimes, because it is. But yes, hi. But you also need to have cards that you're willing to discard for that to be good. So it's not always that straightforward. But that being said, like, I think like you definitely have to have some sort of shred in the deck. You have to respect the Duraludons, even if that is just playing your own. I don't think the 1/1 Dura is playable, but 2/2 definitely is. And I'm not sure where I land on this as a whole. I do think that, again, you get a lot clunkier from playing those different evolutions, but I like that we've got to the point in this format already where there's like justifiably 3 different packages you could play in Lugia, whether that's just like, Tyranitar, Stonjourner, or Yveltal as your attackers, or if you play Urshi, or if you play Dura. And I'm sure there's some other kind of goofy single strike attackers you could easily justify in the deck. And from my perspective, I still think this is probably the strongest deck, just on like what it's doing. But I think that it's obviously not running away with the field like it was last format, so that's great to see.
Yeah.
Final point I'll make is that we were talking about playing how good Goo is. I also think that the Urshi is a lot better into that matchup than the Dura is.
Yeah, let me wait. So Dura is what, 230, and then any single strike drawn is plus 20, right?
Yeah, it's just a like funky number of energies to put on the Dura with what its attacks cost to do that. But I get what you're saying. It still would one shot it with the same. Or is Dura 220?
I thought it was 230, but that's why I'm asking, because I actually don't. We don't play those cards.
That's why I'm checking. It's 220. Yeah, I thought so. So you need 3 for it to one shot a Gudra.
Okay, then yeah, that makes sense. That's why it's awkward, right? Because otherwise, yeah.
You need 3 and the impact energy. Then you're asking for 4 of your specific special energies for you to get a one shot.
Yeah, you need 2 impact to so you need 5 energies on there.
No. Is it double metal?
Yeah.
Oh god, no.
Yeah, so Urshi.
I mean, you still do trade fairly well because like they don't reduce your damage, but they 2-shot you. It's kind of back to the who attacks first problem.
Yeah.
So, and you're taking 2 prizes versus 3, so yeah, it's just not great into Goo.
Yeah, like you said, your words were exactly the right.
Yeah, right. That's so many metal energies, man. Yeah, that you're not one-shotting there. So yeah, I mean, if you're taking the Goo into account a lot too, I think the Urshi is stronger there, but you can probably find another way to attack that matchup. Any other just overall thoughts on EUIC, the meta as a whole? Any thoughts on anything that we
before we get
into touch?
Before we get into like the London Open or the London Cup and stuff like that, the only other thing, like I said, I'm going to mention this control deck every week because I'm going to keep playing it, so I'm not going to go into that now. I was surprised that a Rapid Strike deck got 11th. Good for that guy. That deck is cool. I can't imagine ever signing up with it because. So I'm usually down on people saying, "Well, this deck would make my brain hurt to play," and not only would it, but this is different because not only would it make my brain hurt, but I would also feel bad every single time I saw a hand because most of them would look just heinous,
just abysmal.
So that combination, I'm just not going to go with. But that deck is really cool, and I'd love to see it succeed.
Yeah, happy to see it succeed. I do think that like it is. It's very obvious that there's like a problem for any of these decks to feel. And like I don't actually think that Alex's deck needed to play double Drapion. I think it would have been fine with just one. I think the Gudra deck that topped played 2, and somebody else who netted it and played in another event said, I don't know why you played 2. You didn't need them.
That's interesting because every time I've played Gudra, I feel like I did need 2.
The argument was that you don't beat Lugia anyway because they're all playing 4-path now. Not that it wasn't good.
Well, if that's the argument, then I totally get it. Okay.
Yeah, the argument's that you just lose Lugia either way.
You mean Mew, and your point is
yeah, Mew. Right.
Yeah, because I was on 2. Like that's the one thing I was happy about was going in. Like I had my list like that I changed up going in, and then as soon as I saw one at the top, I'm like, oh, that's only like 2 cards different. But a lot of like the choices that I made, we ended up at the same place.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, if you're gonna tell me that all of the Mews are just gonna be the 4-path, then I understand the argument.
I mean, I'd for sure be playing 4-path in Mew. We didn't touch a lot on the list, but 4-path seems like it's going to be pretty standard in DT and Mew. And then the Fan of Waves to clear the V-Guard energy, which also sometimes matters against Gudra, though. I mean, I also get that you can, like, Melanie Mirage Gate attach, so, like, the second Drape is sometimes good even without Path. I think the issue is that sometimes the first one is hard to even attack with because you're just getting Pathed constantly, and you're giving them two prize options in Goo, so it's not like you have infinite time like you do in a regular Lost Box to figure it out.
Yeah. I agree with that. Okay, so let's move on to the London Cup. Usually, like, obviously, like, League Cup results are not going to be shared or anything like that, but whenever you have a League Cup that is 338 players, it seems worth looking at. It was won by Nico Alabas, who, I mean, just recently won the special event in Utrecht. There, he was playing Arc Dura. Luckily, here, he decided to adopt some deodorant and some soap and play Gardevoir. Is that better?
Yeah.
I don't know, but yeah. So this was also very. I think it's. I don't know if it's the exact same list as just looking at it quickly, but it looks very similar, if not the exact same list as Towards. He's part of the same, like, testing group, so that makes sense.
I know he played two of the regular Gardevoir, and I'm not sure what the cut was, but
Oh, okay, yeah. I looked at it very quickly and did not see the cut, but that makes sense. He's still playing the penny. I
it
don't
was
know.
a research. He cut a research for a Gardevoir.
Interesting. Yeah. So that was the winner. The rest of the top cut breaks down as let's see, Turbo Lasso, and two Gudra, two Mew, Guardy V Union, and a version of Lost Box, which that's one of the few lists in the top cut that we don't have. So I don't know if it was Sable's Art or one of the myriad other Lost Zone versions, but like, this again kind of like hammers home what we've been saying about the event. Like, if you're gonna tell me you're gonna get a couple Lost decks, a couple Goos, a couple Mews, and I guess in a sense a couple Guardies, but I'm surprised no Lugia is top. But otherwise, like, this feels about where we were at.
So a trend
right?
I've been noticing, which kind of comes full circle to the, like, well, what are we doing about Goo as the Lugia deck, is that since the event, I've seen a pretty big drop off to Lugia, and I think that is just people not quite knowing how they want to adapt their deck to beat both, like, Retreat Lock, Gudra, Dura. Like, you have to beat all of these things when a week ago you really didn't know that you had to beat them to do okay with Lugia. You would day two just fine at a UIC without acknowledging a single one of those, and you weren't top cutting a UIC by ignoring all of them, but that was more than enough to get into day two. So now I think a lot of people are either hesitant to play it or they're playing against those decks and losing.
Yeah, that's a valid point. I don't know. We'll get into, so as we move on with this, we're gonna get into some online events, and Lugia definitely does make a resurgence of sorts. But yeah, definitely, I think that's the only, like, glaring thing here is that Lugia is not there. But so I guess I'll start with what Brent Tonneson played, because, like, we've talked about the Guardi list with Tord already. I know that you've been much bigger on the Forest Seal version of Lost Box than I have throughout. Do you like where that's placed right now, coming out of this weekend, or yeah, I think you said that that's the version you've played the most since, correct?
Yeah, that's the version I've played the most in general. And that's the deck that, like, if I'm sitting at home with, like, my cards and just shuffling them and, drawing hands and goldfishing and stuff, that's the deck that I always am playing with. I think that deck's well positioned. I actually think that it comes out better from this event because Guardy's going to see an uptick. I think the Dragonite's well positioned right now. So, I mean, I think that this deck is better positioned than it was before. I do think we'll see, like, closer to an even split going forward between this and Sablezard, but I'm not positive the best way to play this, if you should play Kyogre or not. It kind of feels like you either play Drapion or you play Ogre, and Ogre requires you to play more cards because you need to play, like, one more energy in the Ogre, and some people like playing triple energy recycler if they play Ogre. I don't think you need three. I think that's unnecessary, but that's a separate conversation altogether. And yeah, I don't know. I think that the deck is very good, though. I think it's very well positioned. And I'm just looking at the list real quick to see if anything here stands out to me. This looks pretty stock all around for the deck. Have you played with these versions at all?
I haven't this past week, like, since, like, we've gotten the updated meta. I did before going in, and, like, it's obviously good. I think it's specifically good in the mirror because, like, you get the 10 first, you get the 7 first, or whatever. And I think, like, this may be awkwardly the best, but, like you were saying earlier, like, and even though, like, I downplayed it saying that I didn't think it was an auto loss for Sables, I do still think that this is probably the best version.
It's definitely better against Sablezard.
Yeah, well, my point was,
Or, I'm sorry, better than Sablezard against Dura.
Yeah, so I think it's the best one into the Arc Pile deck. So if you
Mhm.
think Arc Pile is going to see I think it's going to see an increase. If you think it's going to see enough of an increase that it's into the top like 3 play decks, I don't necessarily, but if it
Yeah, I
does,
don't.
so like if it creeps up to there, then I like this deck a lot. I still think I like it of the versions that we've played a bunch of. I think it's my least favorite one to play.
Interesting. That's funny. It's by far my favorite to play.
You know what? I actually might like it better this format, and I think that what we came to last format, and I don't know how I feel about this because I want to like the card a lot, and I know that it'll lead to judgment in my friend group for not liking the card. I don't love Pokestop. I'll just be the first one to admit it.
So I'm gonna hit you with a little bit of a caveat here. Brent's list doesn't play it.
No, I know. That's what I was saying because I looked at his list and I
Okay.
was like, oh wait a minute. So that's kind of why I might like it better now because it doesn't play it. And like,
Yeah, that's an embarrassingly wrong opinion. This is why Grant's deck that he bubbled out of Top Cut with is clearly better because it plays Pokestop instead of Beach Court.
yeah, I
But
kind of figured that's how you were gonna
whatever.
feel.
Uh, Jokes aside, like Pokestop's a cool card, and Pokestop, if you're gonna go the Ogre route, also is significantly better. So
Ah,
that's one of the other things that plays into that decision.
that would change my mind if we were playing.
Well,
I'm
I'm
saying if
I'm
you're,
playing Ogre and Pokestop.
yeah, if you're not, then I really don't particularly care for the Pokestop. If you do, like, absolutely could see the argument for it. And honestly, I think I would like this version a lot more. And obviously, we're not looking like 3 months ahead, but
Mhm.
a lot of my thought process is going to be towards the next one because that's the next event that we're like practicing for and thinking about. I obviously like that much more when we get Super Rod
Mhm.
because you're able to actually hit something that's recyclable as opposed to if you hit a Clara, you
Yeah,
just want to jump off a bridge. So,
not
um,
needing to play three energy. I don't. I still again. I just play two, but the idea of playing three energy recyclers, which some people do, is just like abhorrent. God
that
forbid. I
yeah,
could
that's
not.
kind.
It could not be me. But I think like something that has really favored this deck, this format compared to last, is that um, you're not. It doesn't matter that the cat's out of the bag as much now that like you're going for like the turn one attack with your Dragonite, because you're just so much faster to getting Sableye set up than the other decks that you have that angle no matter what. So it doesn't
Yeah,
matter that your opponent just like benches something stupid and goes, oh, you can't rope my V up to knock out. It's like, okay, you get 3 turns against Sablezard, but like 4 sometimes if they go first. You're getting 2 before my Sableye's attacking, my man.
yeah,
And when I
yeah,
say
yeah.
2, I mean like if I go first or if I go second, like you get 1 attacking
You
turn
get that
before
turn.
I
Yeah,
like, you know what I mean?
yeah.
It's a real dicey position to be in, and yeah, that's good. I don't know. Yeah, I'm not sold between like Beach Court or Pokestop, but I think it's interesting that you have both options. To touch on another Lost Box thing while we're on this, have you felt that the Sky Seal versions are just basically gone at this point? Like, I don't feel that Sky Seal Lost Box is a playable version of the deck in the
So
current game.
like the only way, and like we're gonna get, like I said, we're gonna get into the online events over 100 players coming up, but I think the only one that I even saw was just playing like a one of copy of it and
Mm-hmm.
playing a Forest Seal anyway. So like
Mm-hmm.
I think that might be where this is going in the sense that I think Forest Seal is the better of the two cards. I don't necessarily mind playing a copy of the Sky Seal Stone because sometimes that spike, like I don't think that spikes win more. I think sometimes that spike is actually just like such a swing in momentum that it can really change a lot of games, but I like that it's not like something you're dependent on, which is an interesting adaptation.
I think my issue is that like it felt really good last form because I thought the Mew matchup was closer than it is now, and now that like I just feel like Lost Box is so favored to Mew at this point that like
You don't
I'm
really need it.
that's where I'm at. I feel like that's the best place for it. It's there's some situations where like maybe if you can hit a Arceus with Galarian Zapdos if you play that, that's like decent.
And
Eh,
it's not like last format where in Delugia where you had to hope, like if you were playing that with the Raikou, you had to hope that you were hitting it, so then the rest of your
that
prizes were
was
gonna
the
be
way
single
that it
prizers.
worked, but
But
like
like your prizes this time are all like Tyrannitars and stuff like
mhm.
that. So
Right. It's not
like
like they're only presenting one prizers, and it's like it is like a funky one of that you play to try to hit even in those versions, and they're like milling you with T-Tar anyway. So like, what are you hoping to hit this turn one and kill their Lugia, and that's it? I don't know. Just doesn't seem well positioned. Um,
no.
Working a little bit backwards, do you like any of the like non-Forest Seal Mirage Gate builds? I don't know if you saw like the list Nick Moffat got top 16 with. It was playing like the Dark Energies with Galarian Moltres and um, no Radiant Charizard. Like it's a Greninja version, but with zero Vs.
Yeah, I'm interested. I really like it just depends on how the format shapes up. I think that depending on how things go from here, I think the Moltres is absolutely busted in this format if Mew and Gardevoir keeps like I think that card's one of the better attackers that like Lost Box has access
Yeah,
to.
I agree with that
I don't know what it'd
conceptually.
be one I'd play right now.
I'm just not sure. Again, we just talked about how the Mew matchup's pretty good already, and we've talked about this being the deck that gatekeeps Lost or that gatekeeps Guardy. Why we need a Moltres? I mean,
Well,
again, it's the same concept as playing the Drapion, though, where it's like if you play Drapion in Forest Lost Box, Mew goes from being like a good matchup to like you're not losing. I'm sure the Moltres does the same thing. It goes from being a good matchup to a matchup that you can't lose.
yeah, it's just you take it that way without actually having to give up multi prizers, which I
Right,
think is
right.
very relevant. I don't know. I don't know. I really like the card. I think it's something I would try.
Yeah, I picked up one of the alt art ones because they're so cool. So
Oh yeah, I did too. They're absolutely beautiful and they're like $1. So
yeah, yeah,
uh yeah, as much as I just said I don't love Pokestop, in a version like this where like as long as you're able to end up having access to one Clara, like Clara's
mm-hmm.
so good in a version like this
Mm-hmm.
that like I actually don't mind it there. So I don't know. I think that there's something there. I think that Moltres is going to see success throughout the format. I just don't necessarily think it'll ever be the number one way that the
Yeah.
deck is played.
Now, I guess this isn't like a question. There is nothing coming in that way, but I think it is really cool that there's so many different angles for Lost Box still, even if I think some of them are clearly worse than others. There's just like so much you can do with the deck. It debatably even more than last format, and I think that's sick.
Yeah. Yeah, it's what we've always liked about the deck is
Mm-hmm.
that it gives us so much room to tinker with. Whereas like they're like I think that like a lot of times we feel like Lugia or Gardevoir or something like that are within like you're gonna play like the same 55 cards. You could like Lugia or sorry, Lost Box gets down to you could be playing like the same like 48 cards. And while that's
Your
not
deck
that
would be
much different,
completely different.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. It's so different, and I think that's really cool because as somebody who wants to play, I don't necessarily want to play the same deck all format. I'm not one of those people, but like having the
I don't
option to
think you'd
play
be
it,
upset to play a comfy deck all format though.
I certainly wouldn't, and that's what's really cool.
And
And
if you just break it down to comfy decks, there's like five, six if you count Tina playable list that you could play.
you said playable, so you can't include Tina, but I agree with your general point.
I did say if you count. I gave the caviat. It
Well, if
is
you count it, I
legal.
don't want to talk to you.
Okay, that makes more sense. Again, I would count. You could play your Tina deck minus 6 Tinas plus 6 energies, or however many Tinas they play now. I'd still call it Tina because I wouldn't let you cut your grass and psychic energies.
All right. Yeah. Let's move on to the online format. So that gave us a little way to kind of like move on after the event,
Oh man, can't
and
wait to talk about what won the first late night after that comment.
oh, that's why I did it, Dave. Welcome behind the curtain. So the first late night event. So typically we like over the last few weeks we've been looking at events that were a little bit smaller because we're looking at a brand new format. But now that we have 3 events that are over 100 people, we're gonna focus on those again. And the first one is a late night event, number 91 that had 208 players. And Dave, why don't you tell me what won that event?
I believe that it is a Lost Zone deck featuring cards such as Radiant Greninja, Sableye, Cramorant's in there. There's a Drapion in the list. Some
Uh-huh.
grass energies. I'm not really sure what they're doing with those. 2 copies of Roxanne in the deck. That's definitely not like indicative of being any sort of list. And yeah, no, just like a Lost Zone deck.
The issue is that looking at this top 8, like I know you immediately want to write off this list, because there are there's 2 Lost Zone Tina. There's a Fusion Mew in here. Like this is not Dave's event, but there's
Just
also
just so
it,
for anyone who didn't catch it, Lost Zone Giratina won the late night.
yeah, and like it's not an inspiring list. Like not
Also,
that
like
any
look
of
at
them
those
are,
one of stadiums. Like this list is just gross.
but this is what Giratina has been, right? Is that
I
it's
don't know.
kind
I
of
quit
always
looking at lists because it's not playable.
it's really unfortunate because I really want to love Giratina. I remember when Giratina got printed and you told me that I was going to play it no matter what because it's my favorite Pokemon. And luckily, I have not stood by that because this deck is hot garbage.
My
But
my favorite part of that was it did take a while during the Lost Origin format. It took one tournament of me playing Giratina for me to say I'm pretty sure the best version of this deck doesn't play Giratina. And he goes, no, that's just you hating the card. And it might have taken me a full month to get you off of it.
that's true. Um, that's still less time than it's taken some people because there's still a ton of people that when this format started went, wow, I'm going to play Tina. And luckily, most of them decided that they were wrong.
Yeah,
But I didn't get tricked again. Now, you know what would have tricked me? If I had the gold ones
yeah,
or like the alternate arts from Lost Origin. Like,
Yeah, both, right?
Yeah. Oh no, if you have both, like I don't care if the deck could be like
No,
literally
you
I'd
have
lose
to
every
play it.
game.
Gotta
I'm
play it.
playing every. I'm
Those are the
playing it.
prettiest cards in the world.
Yeah, because the second coolest Pokemon of all time,
What's first?
the one that does Belly
Polytoad.
Drum.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah.
I
Sorry.
don't even think he.
Oh,
No,
Belly
okay,
Drum. You're a big Charizard guy. That's cool.
I don't even think that he does Belly Drum is the worst part, but he does. He certainly Paris songs.
But yeah.
Anyway,
So I mean, I don't have a lot to say about this late night. I don't think this was a very like indicative top cut from this one. Um,
honestly, I think the other one was much more indicative.
yeah, I would agree with that. And I'd also like to point out that the player who won's name, it doesn't have a nationality listed for them or anything, but their name is Urine. So take that as you will.
It's weird that it does not. That like, is that
Everyone
the?
else has one. Not
Yeah, I
everyone,
think
but almost.
almost. It's the only person in the top 30 that does not have a nationality. Good for Urine.
Yeah.
He's in or
Yeah.
she's in, I guess.
Yeah.
Well,
Big
the one
piss
that won
guy.
the one that won the next one is Pink Onion. So, and they won with Gudra, and we've already said how
Getting
much of a
sticky.
big fan. So I guess I want to ask one thing to you about Gudra. I want to like actually it's two questions, but I think that like there are two specific card choices that I've seen where some people are playing Raihan, whether it be over or in addition to Melanie, and then they're playing V-Guard Energy. What are your thoughts on those two cards? Because I have not felt the need to fit them into my list yet, and I don't know if I'm crazy.
Yeah, you mean specifically Raihan and Vigard Energy, right? Nothing to do with Melanie.
No, Melanie's in the list. That
Yeah, I was
card's
kidding.
good.
Melanie's the Stones. Yeah, I sort of agree with that statement. I don't really think that you need to play Raihan or Vigard, especially with Mew picking up Fan of Waves. It kind of feels like you're losing percentage points by taking the time to go through the Raihan Vigard play. I mean, it's there, so like if they don't have it, that's good. But it kind of seems like you're doing a lot of work for not a lot of gain, and I would probably rather just play another Melanie.
That's kind of how I feel too. So I'm glad, like, if nothing else, I'm glad you and I are on the same page. It's always what I'm looking for.
Yeah, there you go.
Um,
Right. It's yeah. I mean, if somebody wants to sell me otherwise on it, they can. I guess I'd have to do the math to see what the 30 reduction does against like Tyranitar two shots. But
I don't know. I've been very underwhelmed when thinking about it.
yeah, yeah. I
Um,
agree. That's my first reaction there, and we'll see if that changes. But I'm doubting that it will.
the rest of the top cut was a Rapid Strike Urshifu came in second, Mewtwo V Union came in third, then Mew, Kyogre Lost Box, Mewtwo V Union, Gardevoir, Turbo Lost Zone, and regular Gardevoir. And importantly, Lugia bubbled with the same number of points. So, like, it's right, it could have just as easily been in with a 1-1 Urshifu line.
Yeah, yeah. Bringing it back.
So,
It's coming out.
yeah, I think that, like, and that's kind of, I don't think that shaped our feelings on this, like, our reactions after the tournament, because that's what we were saying beforehand. So, when I saw those results today, I was like, oh, okay. So, like, it's reassuring when you see things kind of adapting the way you think they are.
Yeah. So the big thing that I actually want to ask about when you look at the late night events versus the IRL events is
Yeah.
that Guardy V Union seems to be doing much better online than in paper, and regular Guardy seems to be the thing of choice in paper. Do you think this is a weird quirk? Do you think one's better than the other? Like, where are you at on this? Because from my end, from playing the Mewtwo V Union versions, it's felt like you kind of are putting these cards in your deck, and they're really, really unwieldy. It's just not often that they actually get to do the thing.
Yeah, I think that when we get to actual in-person events that are not an IC level, because like I think people bring out the more consistent things for ICs because of just how much you benefit from just even like being like top like 250 whatever the number is. I'm not anyway. Um, I think that something like Tords is probably better right now. I do think both are going to see top 32 results throughout. So,
Okay.
but like yes, they are blank cards, but I liked them more when they were blank cards from like 2 weeks ago when they were taking the place of like emergency jelly and stuff like that. If they're just gonna take the place of consistency cards, I don't like Mewtwo V Union. I can see
Yeah.
the benefit of it. I mean it's pretty good into Arctura ish. I guess I don't know.
It's
How
not
does
too good
Guardy
into Vulpix, right?
you sprinkle damage, right? It
Yeah,
doesn't
yeah.
matter.
No, yeah,
Well,
sure.
it doesn't matter. You're losing that matchup no matter what, probably. As long as they don't prize like the full picks. And even then you might lose.
And even
Ask
then,
Tord.
sometimes you lose. Yeah,
So I don't know. I think that I think that the Mewtwo V Union is going like I cannot unbiasedly answer that, and I'm really actually trying to. And the fact that I'm trying to and coming out as it's probably worse tells you that it's definitely worse
yeah,
because that's up there like my top 5 favorite cards of the format.
yeah.
So
Fair enough.
yeah, and then the last tournament that was over 100 people. again has had the Guardian of the Union getting second place. But there's plenty else to talk about here, and by plenty else I mean we're gonna get
If
through
there's
real quickly.
exactly one thing to talk about here, right? It's just
Is it the
like generic
is it the
stuff other than that.
Well, yeah, so it's Kyogre box got first. The split stone deck that I talked about before got third. Guardian in the top cut, Mew in the top cut, Arctina in the top cut, Goodra in the top cut, and Arceus Regidrago got fourth place at with a record of 7-3. I know this deck
Notably
is
with Purloin and Lipard.
Dave. I know this deck is bad. I know it is. I'm going to send this to you. I didn't send this one to you because I knew we were recording the
Oh,
podcast.
I
So I
didn't
looked it up
send it to
today.
you when I saw it because I didn't want to have to talk about it.
I love this.
I know how
I
much you
know.
like these stupid Regidrago decks.
I can't help it. That card's so cool.
Yeah, man, it's not Mewtwo.
Yeah, no kidding. I'm not saying it's good, Dave. I'm just you can't look at this list and tell me it's not cool. You would never want to draw a hand with it. It
Here's the thing,
it's
man.
cool.
When I look at it, it seems pretty uncool for that reason.
Oh, can you tell me why they're playing live part over Curlia?
Yeah, because it doesn't die to Greninja.
Okay, yeah, that's true. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
I guess if you're going to give up one thing that dies to Greninja, you don't want to do that at all. So there we are. Yeah, I mean this list is fine. It's a Arc Drago deck. It plays Arc Drago cards. Um, yeah. Anything else you want to take away from this weekend of results before I sit here and just tell you how good Arc Drago is?
No, nothing else that I really want to take away from it. So just to kind of close out after looking at a UIC and then the events afterwards, what if you had to play a deck this weekend to win a tournament? What deck would you be playing?
To win a tournament, I would probably be playing. I haven't played Lugia enough, but if you're also telling me I've tested with Lugia, it would probably be Lugia. But if you're gonna go with the amount of testing that I currently have, it would be Goo. I think Goo's right there. I think Goo's insane.
I actually think Goo might be the right choice still for the weekend. Yeah, I don't know that we've come full circle to everyone being prepared for it. I think its matchup spread's pretty good, and we're not seeing a ton of hate directed towards it yet. So right now, I agree. I think that Goo is probably the move.
Yeah, Goo's my favorite deck right
The
now.
matchup that I'd have to play is like honestly, the answer might be Arctura because I don't know if Goo is good against that deck.
You just asked me if I was going to play Arctura this weekend.
No, I didn't ask you that. I'm just saying if the play was to win, if it was Arctura.
Yeah, either way. So, Dave, if
I mean, I wouldn't
win,
be doing it either.
Okay. Okay. I think we both know. Like the issue is we're not answering this correctly.
No, man, I got stuff to do afterwards. I got to get a shower.
If a generic person who did not necessarily care about their hygiene was playing to win this weekend, is Arctura the play? I still don't know if that's the answer because while I think it's better positioned than we thought, or like whatever, I also think people are thinking about it now, and I think that's
Yeah, I
like
think that's a big difference for the deck too.
maybe they
yes.
won't respect it, but if they do, like that hurts.
Yeah, and I'm also just it's not clear how quickly people adapt to it. So like, we don't really see a ton of it in the online results yet, but I don't think that's necessarily people hating it out. More so is not picking it up yet. And
Yeah.
it could be in like the spot, but like obviously the metagame is going to move towards beating it, and I think that the goo counters aren't coming out in force yet, so that's where I would be too. I think that would be my deck of choice if I just had to win a tournament this weekend.
That makes sense. So we'll be back next week. We'll be talking about online results. We don't actually have any regionals, so maybe next week we'll do kind of a deep dive into some things because
Yeah, maybe
otherwise
we
we're
can
just-
pick a deck and just kind of go ham on it. So we've talked about how there's so many different Lost Box variants and so many different Lugia variants. Maybe we'll go in on one of those.
Yeah, I like that, especially because we'll both be back to locals next week, so we'll have that to look at as well. Yeah, I think that the format's in a really cool place, and I'm excited to see where it goes from here.
Yeah, same. It's been a lot of fun testing up to the event. It's cool to see a decent number of our ideas be at least close to right. And there's so many decks that are cool right now. I think this is a really good format.
For sure. But yeah, we'll catch you guys next week with another episode of Ancient Wisdom.
Thanks, guys.